Welcome to the Occupational Safety Leadership Podcast, episode number 84. In today's episode, we're going to talk about controlling exposures with a glove box. So basically, a glove box is a specialized enclosure, so for doing specialized things. So that's a very vague introduction. So let's get started. So the actual definition of a glove box is a sealed container or enclosure that is used to manipulate objects in a controlled environment. It is designed to provide a controlled atmosphere, typically filled with inert gases like nitrogen or argon. I have only seen nitrogen, in order to work with materials that are sensitive to air or moisture. Glove boxes are commonly used in various industries and research fields and have a very wide range of applications. But the big thing, of course, is the controlled atmosphere. So I know when we've done it at my different workplaces with nitrogen, we're trying to make sure that we are not introducing air. Sometimes we are using a chemical that's very specialized, so we want to do everything we can to make sure that it stays pure and it's not picking up any oxygen, any ambient pollutants, any just everyday air that for you and me is perfectly fine and healthy, but will alter the substance. Let's look at a couple of the applications out there. So some of the main uses: chemical research, pharmaceuticals. I mean, we obviously want to make drugs as good as we possibly can. Part of it, of course, is just doing small scale things and saying, all right, controlled atmosphere, really getting this down good. When we look at semiconductors, we also want to make sure that when we're doing things like packaging, that we're going to package in a inert atmosphere so that we're not introducing air. Air, of course, will cause your semiconductor to flex and expand and do different things as it contracts with the rise and fall of temperature and other things. Medical isotope handling. When we think about how, for medical purposes, we're going to use a little bit of radioactive material, we want to go ahead and use and dispense that inside the glove box before, of course, we look at now we're going to introduce this to the human. Aerospace activities, we want to do everything we can to make something as inert or in a inert atmosphere, also with temperature and humidity and all that other good stuff then. So when it's introduced to space, it's going to have a much better performance to it as opposed to going from the everyday air and temperature and humidity that's on Earth, and now we're going to try and use the same thing up in space. Hazardous materials, some things will catch on fire when exposed to air, so we want to go ahead and do everything we can to use it in a inert atmosphere. And it's also good that if you want to have things that will not soak up the humidity, change the chemical composition, all that good stuff of the hazardous material. Couple of examples of glove boxes, and you can get them in small and large. Some of them are going to have a filter on top. Some of them will go ahead and discharge right out to the plant. I mean not to the plant, but to the plant scrubber, to the exhaust system. The big thing is that you're separating the human from the hazard. And even though that you have gloves on the glove box, of course, you still have to check for leaks. But let's look at a couple of common faults with glove boxes. They're only as good as not just the glove box that we buy, but we have to look at our use, the maintenance that we do. But let's look at a couple of the places where we could have issues. We've discussed a little bit about having a torn glove in there. So now we have the possibility of introducing contaminants. Also, of course, if there's a torn glove and you have your hand only in there, you now have a chance of having it contact your human skin. The purification system then, if we're plumbing in nitrogen, argon, whatever we're doing in there, there's still a lot of human factors as part of this too. One of the big human factors that I see often is that people will have a cylinder of nitrogen, and they will go to use the glove box, and they will forget to turn on the cylinder of nitrogen. Temperature and humidity. This is what's happening in your lab. Sometimes your lab is out of control with temperature and humidity. So it's up to the user to go back and say, I am now operating within whatever the spec that's out. The spec could be something like 69 degrees plus or minus 2, and humidity is 40 to 50%, because that will mimic the process that you have, so that you can say, I am 100% have controlled, just as my um, just as when I make something, it's going to be controlled. We also want to look at mechanical wear and tear out there too. As we open up the box, we move things around. There's going to be gaskets and seals and that kind of stuff on there. You can then have leakage in there. And again, you're not controlling the atmosphere exactly the way that you're supposed to then for this. Doesn't mean that it's anything bad and negative. You don't want to do a experiment with something that's not set 100% to the way it's supposed to be, have the experiment work, and then when you go to transfer this experiment, now it doesn't work in the atmosphere of which it's supposed to go. So we always want to use it exactly the way it's going to be used, to go back and mimic that process. Make sure we're really controlling it. We're doing things on a small scale before we look at doing things on a big scale. Some things will always stay at a small scale as we're doing things um, like like radioactive isotopes for medical things. That is it for episode number 84. We talked about controlling exposures with the glove box. These are special ways to help control the atmosphere. They also come with a whole series of different filters and different things. It depends on what that application is. You certainly can't look at a catalog and say, I'm going to buy the cheapest thing because the glove box is a glove box. You have to understand your application, and then you have to buy it for that application. One of the common faults I also find is that people don't understand what the application that it was even bought for, and it's just there. So people think, well, a glove box is a glove box. So you have to have some kind of a way to communicate to the workforce. This glove box can only be used for X operations out there then, because a glove box is not going to work for every single application out there. So that is it for episode number 84. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Dr. David Ayers. Have a safe day.